Good afternoon or morning or evening, wherever you are listening to this. It's where we are. It's Julie and I, anyway. It is Wednesday at noon EST and Jenny, 5 p.m.
5 p.m. Yeah, absolutely. Not so much snow here in the UK, but apparently quite a bit where you are.
Quite a bit is an understatement.
Yes, don't talk about snow or leaks or roof leaking. That is my pet topic.
Oh, no.
Yes, roof leaks, or actually multiple places in the roof is what's going on here.
Oh.
From the snow accumulation, no doubt.
From the snow accumulation, absolutely. And the roofer is like, yeah, can you call back next week? Oh, good one. Excellent. That would be really helpful.
Thanks, Mr. Roofer. Well, thank you for joining us on this talk, which may be a little bit about snow and roofers as well, just in case you're wondering. But this is episode 51 of Recruiting EQ. We do this every week and discuss topics that are near and dear to our recruitment hearts and minds, and based on what we're hearing out there. So this one is called, I went and called it Objection, Your Honor, with a fun little picture from The Lincoln Lawyer. You guys seen that show?
Yes.
Yeah, is it good? I haven't seen it. I used the photo, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I didn't watch the whole thing. I mean, yeah, it's pretty good. I read the books actually, I think too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So the books were good?
The books are better. Often is the case.
Very popular show. So there you go. So I was trying to catch people's attention. But the point of it all is handling tough objections. This has been a topic even internally that we've talked about. I think it's an evolving thing in recruitment for all of you who are also in recruitment, right? There's tons of different ways in which we have to encounter handling objections, right? And we'll tackle those. But first, let's go around the room and introduce ourselves for anyone who might be listening to this for the first time. Starting with Jenny.
With me, good, lovely. So I am Jenny Finch. I am based in the UK and set the business up with Julie about 8.5 years ago, which seems crazy now. Just got just under 35 years worth of recruitment experience across different disciplines. So seen many different economies, different ways of working, different sectors. And yeah, so that's me.
Thanks, Jenny. Julie, you want to go next?
I'll go next. So I'm Julie Robinson, so the opposite of Jenny, and I'm in North America, so I'm in Toronto, and we manage the sort of the North American and, well, North Americans, the Canadian and US business from here, and very similar to Jen with the experience that I have. And when you put this sort of subject together, it was interesting because it took me back in time all of those years ago to what then was the training around objection handling. And I remember distinctly sitting in a room, and this was on the sales side, meaning not the candidate side, and we'll get into both sides, I'm sure, during this conversation, but distinctly sitting there, and my boss at the time, I'm sure you were in this training as well, Jenny, throwing out the objection, and literally like a parrot, you have to sort of like, okay, my handle for that is XYZ or whatever. And I was
knew Mr. Jones too. You knew Mr. Jones, yeah.
Mr. Jones. And then you have to bring back your response and go through the role play. This was in a classroom setting, and until you sort of nailed it, really. And everyone would judge you, very, very judgy on how well you felt like this big during the whole situation. But I have to say that I remember those responses to those questions today. Yeah. And if anyone said to me Jones, I would immediately go, Mr. Jones. So I think that is what Jones means to me. So anyway, it just brought back a lot of memories, good memories actually, but of a point in this whole topic around sort of, you know, prep, how you handle objections from the candidate, from the client side, etc. So anyhow, long introduction there, but it's close to my heart, this one.
That's a great introduction. Well, it is near and dear to our hearts. I was kind of half joking, but apparently it's straight up bang on true. Yeah,
absolutely. Many time doing that. It was actually really fun. It was really fun. Yeah.
even the judginess, eh? Like
well, the good news was that you could also judge other people, so you could like sort of like throw tomato. No, you couldn't throw tomato.
But you could learn. I think the difference was though is that you could actually hear what worked for other people, and the tone, the speed, how somebody chose their words actually from different people sounded differently, and you could sit back and actually think, wow, actually that was really good, and I'm going to use that next time. So yeah, I'm living that moment as well, Julie, to be fair.
Yeah, it's just funny, isn't it? And Rick, before we because I'm like itching to go, I tell you.
No, that's great. This is awesome. I love it. I love
who you are, Rick. Go on.
Love the enthusiasm. Yeah, I'm Rick Coluccio. I'm the host of this podcast type event and VP of BD at RGC. It's a lot of acronyms at Raymond George Consultancy. And you know, in the continued desire to make this program more enjoyable for all of us, I have a fancy new microphone. Isn't that fun? Isn't that great? I got a fancy new microphone.
Got microphone envy over here, to be fair, Rick.
I will send you the link. It was surprisingly inexpensive, and it delivered to my door. So there you go.
Wow.
Anybody can do your own podcast. Okay, before we dive in, just a quick disclaimer: we all love the participation. I even put it out on the post this time because I think everybody who works in sales or recruitment has got stories, anecdotes, whatever about objections and things they've heard. So I did not get any direct messages yet, but I can only assume that's because you're all saving them to share them with us right now. So don't be shy. Do comment, and you know, if you do so, this is going out to multiple different channels. So understand there's a bit of a character length where we're sitting right now. So if it's very long, it might get cut off. We are also not going to name you because we're recording this. So in the interest of privacy, we won't actually name you, but we would love your anecdotes or thoughts or objection handling tips and tricks if you have them, and questions. Disclaimer over. Objections. Here we go.
Okay.
Here we go. Yeah. So like you were saying, Julie, there's a couple of different ways we can tackle this, right? You have the objections on the cold outreach to either a client or to a candidate that you're headhunting. You've also got objection handling for an existing candidate that, for example, it has an objection about a job that you're pitching to them or an offer that you think that they should take or not or whatever. And similarly on the client side, right? An existing client, you've got either a candidate you really believe in and they're like, nah, I don't want to see them because of XYZ. That's an objection handling moment. Or again, same thing, like they want an extra $10,000 on the base salary, or, you know, there's a lot of existing client objection moments that we can touch on as well. Shall we start candidate side? Just to keep it really recruiting-y to start?
Yeah, sure. Yes. And I would actually also say that in our intros, we probably should have mentioned, and I'll do this for you actually, Jenny, I think that I think your experience and your claim to fame actually more so, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, is on the candidate side. I think you are excellent in terms of candidate control, candidate management, candidate objection handling, just the whole candidate experience, far better than I ever was and will ever be, I think. And so I think that this is an area that you can really add a lot of value, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's up there now, isn't it? How do we come down? Yeah.
There you go.
I absolutely believe this. I mean, I've seen you throughout the years manage countless situations with fabulousness and positivity and with the right levels of, you know, positivity at the right time, because I don't think it's all about, and I think that this is already going off into a tangent on either side. So this is not around pushing someone into doing something. No. Which I think is often how people feel that sort of objection handling and, you know, and selling is, and I'm a that's not at all the case as far as I'm concerned, which I think goes back to, you know, sort of how you handle an objection in the first place, which maybe you want to chat about, but it is not about that. It's about a lot of other stuff. It's not pushing someone to do something that they don't want to do.
Mm-hmm. I think personally with candidates, dependent on the part. If the objection is once you've already interviewed somebody and you've built a trust and you've built, you understand what they're looking for, that's a very different process to somebody that you're reaching out to that is not interested because you haven't built that relationship and you haven't built the trust. I always think, particularly with candidates, it's if you've interviewed somebody properly and you've really understood what's important to them and you've got inside their world and you know where they are in their life and what's important in the next role and whether or not they're looking to move today, tomorrow, next year, 6 months' time, then I don't necessarily see it as objection handling. I see it as guidance, actually, in so many ways, because you have to listen to somebody. I'm, and Julie is as well, and Rick, we are all stayers in businesses. So when we join a business, we stay. So making a decision to move out of a business is actually really quite, well, it's not really quite an important decision, but it is, a major decision. So you have to get it right. And I'm often putting myself in a candidate's shoes thinking, is this opportunity that I'm offering them the next best step for them? Or actually, is it better for them to stay where they are? And I genuinely do that with, with conversations. Now, there are situations where in your heart, your client so well, and you've interviewed a candidate and you're already excited about, this particular client. And maybe the candidate isn't necessarily along the same page as you are at that point. So it's actually, their objection, not really sure. Perhaps I've perhaps I've sort of like maybe heard some things about this particular business, and it's almost like in that situation, it's getting the elephant out the wardrobe, if that's the right term, or whatever the term is.
Yeah, it is now. I love that.
Yeah,
it's
getting that out of the wardrobe and actually saying, look, almost like preempting things, because we know our markets, we know what the reputation is, and we know how reputations can change in the period of 6 to 12 months in a particular business. So certainly when I speak to candidates, it's important for me to say, actually, what do you know about them already? And if they haven't, got any preconceived sort of like knowledge, I will talk about a client's journey. I'll talk about where they were, where they are now, and what they're doing. Because I think it's important to be transparent about opportunities. I think it's about being real as well with a candidate, managing their expectations that perhaps they're not going to get exactly what they want, but that's okay because it's a starting point. But knowing your client with a candidate, I think, is absolutely vital personally, because then you can, like I do sometimes with clients, you can put your neck on the line and say, actually, everything that you've told me, I've done the role for a long time. I'm absolutely confident, have a conversation with them. Now, I never push it, because if I don't feel that it's right, but I will sometimes be really sort of like, look, I really genuinely believe. And when I also interview people, I tend not to interview them with a role in mind. So I really understand what that person is looking for, because I think as recruiters, sometimes you can see a CV or you can see a candidate, you've approached them, there's interest. It's like, oh, great, I've got this great role. So you're selling the role before you really find out and listen to what that person wants, because ultimately it might not be right for them. So it's a bit, it's a little bit complex because every situation is different, but I think it's about listening and really getting to know the candidate before you then start presenting opportunities. And there's been, many occasions in my career where I've started talking to somebody thinking, absolutely, this is great. And the more that they talk, I think, no, it's not right. And I'll say, the role that I've approached you for isn't the right role for you because of what you've told me here and XYZ.
But that's interesting. And both Julie and Jenny, you guys both mentioned off the hop, right, that this isn't about pushing people into things that they don't want to do at all. So I feel like and of course the sirens begin.
Yeah.
Microphone equals loud sirens. Apologies to everyone. But it's just interesting that the objection handling concept is vastly different depending on how you start the process, right? Like the very beginning of it will dictate, like you said, Jenny, barely seems like objection handling at that point. If you really come in it and you learn everything there is to learn about the person, you're just having kind of a real conversation about how you've gotten to know them well. And I think that people who dread objection handling from candidates often maybe didn't either, or maybe are pushed into an environment where they're supposed to be pushing out a job and not really listening. But that active listening really changes the game the whole way.
But I think it's listening, but also hearing as well. And I think that, you know, sometimes if you are in a fortunate situation where a candidate is telling you honestly what is missing from their current role, we as recruiters have a responsibility to ensure that we are not putting them into their next role and almost like ruining their career track, to say, you know, you've been there 5 years, and knowing ethically it's the wrong move for them to go there. To the next role if it's not right for them. So it's hearing. And I mean, I had a situation recently where we made a outreach to a particular candidate. During that discovery call, understanding what this particular individual wanted in the next role, what was important to them, and very fortunately, they were quite open. During that call, I was sort of like thinking, no, this isn't right. And I actually said, look, I'm not sure this role is absolutely right for you for these reasons. And they came back and said, well, actually, what I meant by that wasn't that. It was actually this, this, and this. And that person over a period of time is now in that role. They've been successfully placed into the role that we reached out to them for. But I wouldn't have felt comfortable not addressing that. And I think that you need to address the things. Look, actually, I'm not sure it's going to meet that, and give somebody a choice, rather than putting it under the carpet and almost like saying, no, I didn't hear that. Hear it, address it, and listen.
Totally.
And I'll switch actually onto the client side, if I may, just for a second, because I think that that sort of core, or those three things that you just mentioned there, Jen, are the most important things in any communication, whether you're trying to sell or promote something or talk about something or whatever the goal is. Are the most important things. So if you can't figure out what the most important things are to the clients, and actually what their pain points are as to, on the candidate side, as to why they might potentially want to move, or on the client side, why they might potentially need to hire, when we're talking about this from a staffing perspective, you haven't got the hope in hell of selling anything that's going to stick for long. And I don't even want to use the word sell, because I don't consider this selling. And whilst we are in a sales profession, I actually don't consider myself a salesperson and never have. I don't think staffing people should be salespeople. The connotation of that is really like a very transactional, sort of just like pound it out, sort of high volume talker. That's the connotation that I get when I think of a salesperson. And I think that what we're trying to do here, in staffing particularly, and to be successful, is actually is a consultative sell, or promotion of people that might be relevant for the role that perhaps the client's looking to hire for, or maybe not even, but they'll solve a business problem that the client has. So it's a consultative promotion of an element which is, in our case, people that can solve the problem. But just going back to the point there, or your sort of three areas, Jen, I think that during this whole communication exchange, we've obviously got to get there. So we've got to have the opportunity of getting there, meaning we've got to be able to find a way to speak to a potential client or a potential candidate. And dependent on the market, or depend on which one is more or is easier to get. So in a candidate-driven market, those are the hard ones that are different. They're hard to engage with, and they know it because they're being tapped up in every way, shape, or form. Or on the other side, if it's the client-driven market where there are not many jobs, then they're the ones that are getting sort of pounded for sort of like to try and get the door open, because everyone needs more opportunities to work on it, for example, being quite crude about it. And it's how do we get there? So how do we get a client or a person, let's call them a person, because at the end of the day, whether a client or candidate doesn't matter, there's still a person to talk to us. And that's where I think the sort of the process needs a place, in my opinion, because I do think that this is about quantity and quality. And I think if you have a rubbish process, you'll miss and you'll leave stuff on the table. You'll miss it, and it just won't. The output won't be as strong as if you had organised it and you have a process up front. So,
I'm
interested to know.
Shall we talk about the cold outreach and those kinds of barriers, objections, all that stuff, I guess, right? I mean, the cold outreach, both to candidates and clients, I think, I mean, barriers is another good word to use sometimes, like, because, the objections has a connotation, jokingly using the Lincoln lawyer aside, it's not like often they are truly objecting to what you were saying or you as a person.
No, but I also, I mean, I would love to actually know the stats now in terms of cold outreach. How many people are picking the phone up and having that conversation as a first point of contact rather than an email? I'm sure that probably everyone listening here, I mean, I get so many emails like pitching, not really understanding who we are, haven't done their research, but I'm just like, they're selling to me just from the off. The people that pick the phone up, I will have a conversation with, because it's almost like a little bit of a rarity now, isn't it? It shouldn't be, but the market has shifted. So I think that there's cold outreach, which actually is blimmin' hard, from a because you're kind of shooting, aren't you? And it's like, oh, what do they need? Who are they? What do they need? And that's hard. Whereas at least with a conversation, you can get, you can hear a tone. Not everyone's going to want to speak to you. Absolutely. No. People have got great relationships with other, clients have got great relationships with other recruiters, which is fantastic. And I always remember being taught in many ways that the client that you really worked hard to get the first opportunity with is the client that will stick with you. The ones that actually are very happy, so yeah, give it a go. Yeah, you can have it too. I've got X amount of agencies, but actually you haven't got a deep enough understanding as to what that client wants. And you haven't had the opportunity. All you're trying to do is the me too. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, me too. And the ones that are harder to get in front of, the ones that are harder to get on the phone, actually are potentially the ones that you can really develop a really trusting and valuable and knowledgeable relationship with.
I think to your point there, Jen, it's the people that you do manage that are very flippant around, oh, okay, here's a job that you can work on, and it's a very sort of easy thing for them to say. I actually think that those are the clients that you don't even want, because I think that a lot of and we've sort of skipped over how to get to the point or the person and actually get a live conversation. But I think that a lot of what happens in the conversation isn't around. This is about building relationship and building rapport. It's not about trying to pick up a job, in my opinion. So let's just say that you've job chased, right? So let's say you've ad chased and you happen to have stumbled across the client that has picked up the phone and they've got an active job. I think that most people will try and pick up that job. And maybe the client will give it to you because they've already advertised. Maybe they haven't, and maybe you should pick it up. But I think that the decision to try and pick that up should be a strategic one around what the client actually says to you, because what they could be doing is just sending you off on a wild goose chase with 10 other agencies on that same wild goose chase. But you're so excited that a client's actually A, picked up the phone, B, is prepared to potentially give you a job that you can work on and might even pay you a fee. It's like, hurrah. So I think before we get there, I think we need to think about what is the goal of the conversation? What is the goal of my whole calling block? What do I consider successful, and go into the calling session in control rather than reactive of like, okay, well, whatever happens is brilliant. It's like, well, that's not necessarily brilliant, because it could just waste many hours of your time. So
Yeah, I also think that sometimes picking up a job in that very early doors in that conversation, you have less chance of filling that role because you don't understand the culture of the company. You don't understand what they're looking for. You can't present it properly to your candidate because you don't know, because it's a transaction, isn't it? It's like, so sometimes, and I'm not saying that people should do this, but might it be better to actually say, look, I'm not able to understand what you're looking for. Yes, I'd love to work on the role, but I'm not actually equipped at the moment to do your firm justice, to do your, to present this to my candidates or go out to the market, because actually I don't know what it is that you want. Because yes, I've got a title. Yes, I understand, it's a recruiter or it's a 360 person, but every business is different. And I think certainly in our markets and most recruitment markets, you have to understand why someone's going to join that firm, why someone is going to be interested, to give yourself the opportunity to position it and find the right candidate for them. So walking away from a role might actually be the right brave move at the early doors.
Or even if you're like, I'm a big fan of the qualification call and then the intake call, so that you've given another step in the process to slow it down intentionally with the client to get to know them better. See if, you know what I mean? If you are on the fence because you feel like it's too quick, you can just qualify, is this even worth a second call at this point, right? And then if they do that second call and you say, okay, let's take a good 45 minutes and talk just about this role so that we can actually really dig in. If they're amenable to that, and then you do that second call, you can still walk away once you realize, now, you know what, I don't want to pick up this job. But at least you're sort of qualifying whether or not the client wants to invest the time for it to be more of a partnership, right? So it's less just that, like, job in the wind that you don't know if anybody's really gonna.
Hard. I do think it's hard though for people when we're talking about objection handling, almost like to get the credit. You need credibility when you're talking to a client. So when you're trying to take a role on, very quickly, I think you need to be asking the right questions, in terms of that qualification. Sometimes clients don't, if they don't know you and they don't know who you are, they are investing time in terms of actually giving you that information. And I think historically, sometimes recruiters can get a bad name because they take down all the information or they don't ask the questions, and then they don't find the right person. So there's probably a step before in terms of, we'd like to work with you, Mr. Client. We'd love to understand your business. This is how we successfully work with other organizations in terms of this intake call is so important, and we need to have 30 minutes, 45 minutes for us to do that. And, we can advise, because I think often when you're talking to a client, if you know your market that you're in, you're able to advise them, is this person actually out there? Are they paying the right salary? How are they marketing themselves? Are they getting access to the right individuals that they're looking to hire? And if not, why not? And being in a position to actually say, and not saying push back with the client, but almost like being confident enough, and that then gains trust because you know your market. So it's not just being okay, yes, you want this, and yes. It's actually thinking about it. Can you find that person out there?
Yeah. And just to go to the comments for a sec, because we've had a few from a couple of people. So just to back up, the most recent one was, do you try to find the perfect fit or look to stretch the roles for candidates? I think that's kind of what you're addressing there, Jenny, that it's
I didn't know that comment was there, actually.
I know, it's good timing.
But no, absolutely. I mean, I think it's, one of the things that we definitely say to clients is that, if the person that you're looking for is doing exactly the same role in the same market at the same level for another business, why are they going to move? People move for growth and learning. Yes, they can move for salary if they're underpaid, but genuinely speaking, people want to learn to move and they want to do something a little bit different. So if our role is to look at and educate a client to a degree as to, if they want that perfect fit, why is someone going to take it? What's going to be different enough about that opportunity? So absolutely, yes, we stretch it as much as we possibly can. Yeah, we do. We try and educate a client.
Yeah. I don't know that perfection actually even exists, and what does that even mean, right? So it's like perfection is just someone's utopia of something that they're, it's. So I think it's it's must-haves and would like to haves. That's the most important thing. And the would like to have is the stretch, if you like, because they may or may not. So I think those are the most important things to ask. Just going off on this tangent here with this one particular question, but I do think that just going back to sort of like making sales calls and actually entering into a conversation, I do think that the prep around who you're calling, which I was always terrible at, actually. I was always someone that's like, I just call them. I'll just jump into the swimming pool without any life bands. I'll just call. And I was never a big preparation type person. Because, I felt that winging it was a good strategy, which, for me, it sort of worked most of the time. But I think that most people are quite uncomfortable with that. So I actually do think that some sort of preparation is good, especially in a more educated market or with a more educated buyer. I think that they can generally, sort of smell someone that's just winging it. But if you're very good at it, potentially you can just wing it. But I do think that preparation is good to know who you're calling and what you're calling about, where in the sequence of calls or outreach are you, that you can reference them. Just having a clue, how much hiring they do, what do they hire for, potentially who else they use as well. So competitor intelligence around that you will have heard from the market, I'm sure. Who else they use? Are they using different agencies? Are they happy to pay for fees or not? So are they an agency advocate or not? And then that gives you some clue as to how to present yourself and your business when you're on the phone, assuming that you get on the phone with them. And going back to the original question, actually, around cold calling, like who actually is still cold calling? I mean, I feel that it is a differentiator these days. It is a differentiator. So many people are just turning to electronic communication for their outreach. And, it's just overwhelming, the amount of people or the amount of contacts that you get on a daily basis. So I do think it's a point of difference actually making a cold call. In fact, I had a fellow that I spoke to the week before last, and he's like, I love the fact that you called me. It's like brilliant. And I'm like, oh great, perfect. Like someone actually is like going hurrah that's what we're doing. And it's because that's what we should be doing, in my opinion. We're trying to develop a relationship. How can you develop a relationship with someone on an email? You just can't. Yeah. It's protracted because it's like email. And it's like, let's just go for the jugular here and actually sort of get in and have a live conversation. So anyway, I went on to a bit of a soapbox there, but I do think that cold calling, verbal cold calling, with some preparation, and then it's around, once I get someone, what am I going to say? Right?
Yeah.
For sure. I would say
it's what's my objective in this call, isn't it? It's, do I want to visit? Do I want to see, how they hire? Do I want to present a candidate potentially in a that I think that they might be interested in? It could be anything, but it's really being clear about that. And also, I think sometimes you can hear in someone's voice that it's the wrong time. And however much, getting that extra question in, I think it's about reading the room sometimes as well, and actually saying, look, I can hear you're busy. I don't want to keep asking you things, but I'd love to speak to you. When's a better time? Or let me drop you an email, even if you can hear someone's busy and trying to get off the phone. Because I find that sometimes if someone's ringing me and I'm like, look, I've got 2 minutes because I've got another meeting that I'm going to, and they just keep going. And they actually haven't heard me because they've got a script to say. And that script almost overrides the reading the room and the human element. I'd much prefer 100%. Them to say, look, I hear you, let me go, I'll ring you back, no problem.
I agree with you 100%. And this is the thing, is that those like preparation and knowing what you want out of the call help as direction. But I do think that people should even try to do just I'm my own value, like I'm a value added, person, whatever it is, sales recruiter, whatever. And so if you call fully cold, not knowing where it's going to go, at least it gives you some chops to not panic. Because I feel like the ability to not panic and stay like a human being and have a human conversation is kind of a superpower in cold calls. And it really shows, like you're saying, Jenny, if someone just powers through on a script, or they've done their preparation, they have a goal in mind, but they can only do it singularly because they don't have the power to improvise and just be a person and chat. It kills the call every time.
Years ago, when I was very first in recruitment, and like Julie, we had word tracks, so we kind of knew we could adapt them, we could go, in a different way. And I remember calling this potential client, and they gave me an objection that wasn't on the word track, and it was
no! What do you know?
Do you remember what it was?
And I actually said, look, I'm really sorry, but I haven't been taught how to overcome this. And they laughed, and it's like, I've got all these. Could you not give me a different one that I've got the script for?
That's hilarious.
That was all I could do. But yeah, it was, and that's, I think, isn't it? It's having an infrastructure to appreciate it, to understand it, maybe ask some more questions. But I think it's actually hearing and listening again without trying to sell, and getting that sort of like funnel that people often talk about, gathering facts. Sometimes we don't have the opportunity to have that length of conversation, but yeah, it's
I also think it depends where you are in your sales career, and I've used the sales word again there. So I think it's perfectly acceptable and admirable, actually, for someone who's pretty new to this to be fairly transactional, just to almost like, sort of like spit the dummy type of thing. It's like, I've just got to just do a few so that I get used to this before you try and refine your approach. Or I think that's perfect. It's like, get the training wheels. The training wheels are on. Let's see what happens to get you into the swimming pool. Just have a little bit of a float around. And then when you've sort of heard some things, and maybe you've mucked up, but that's okay. Once you muck up once, the goal here is that you learn from that, right? And we all muck up. But I think also, if you can add some humor into it, like you did there, Jen, I think actually it doesn't matter what you say. That's my actual thing. If I can get someone laughing, no matter what the situation, they're in. They are totally in, and they will talk to me because they just enjoy the conversation. So, that's honestly how I do it. It's like, wherever I can, inject humor.
Where years ago, I used to with new people in recruitment, almost like, for me, once someone's kind of ticked off 200 calls with, in terms of outreach to clients, that gives you a really good basis to have had 200 conversations, whether that's in 4 weeks, 50 a week, getting through to people, whether it's over 6 weeks, whether it's over 2 weeks. Almost like by the time somebody's actually got to that point, the reality is that there is a comfort that no one can throw anything at me that, potentially I don't know how to answer. And even if they do, I'm going to be, come clean. Look, I'm new, I'm new to this. I don't understand, or I'm not sure how to answer that. But, to be honest about it as well. I think that you can't expect to be proficient at anything until you've done those miles. And I'm interested to know, Julie, from your perspective, or Rick, does 200 mean, is that a good benchmark in today's world? Is it too high?
I think it depends. I think it depends on who you are and what you've done before. So I think that sounds like a fair amount, but I think it depends what your experience level is. Because if you've done something like this before, outside of staffing, or had any training, so I think someone that's like brand new, I don't know, you could just maybe do a check-in every 50 or something like that. But I think it really depends on the person, how many they've connected with, what's been thrown at them, how many objections that they've had. There's also think that whether it's candidate or client side, there's only so many objections, right? I mean, there's only like, I haven't got any, and these aren't even objections. They're just sort of like, there's, I haven't got any time at the moment, or I'm not interested. They're not the real objection. They're just like, I haven't got enough. You haven't said enough to get me interested at this point to give you the time. But there's, there's cost. We're using someone else. We've already got a PSA or a supplier list. On the candidate side, is like, I'm deliriously happy where I am, or I'm tied because I've got commission coming through, or this is like, the culture is fantastic, which is brilliant, and I want to stay here. And so there's only a few buckets that this could go in. And as long as you know what to say after listening, to whatever bucket that they're going down. And there might be a couple of buckets, actually. There could be a few objections, so it's not
in a row.
just one. So it's like, as long as I can have some sort of something to say which is relevant, meaningful, and value add, hopefully, to the objection which is given to you, then hopefully you can move on to the next one and find out if there's even, you know, another or whatever to get to the end result if you choose to have that. I used to think about this when I used to do this a lot, all the time. It's almost like chasing a rabbit. And used to think, like, who's going to win the race here? Because I used to think, okay, right, so I've got you there, and now I move on to the next one. What's the next one? Give me the next one. I used to treat it like a bit of a fun game, just in my own head. Yeah, I know, I'm crazy. But in terms of like, how many do I need to find of these objections before I've caught you, type of thing? That's my goal. I want to. It's on my terms that I'm going to get you, and decide which way the conversation goes. That's how weird I was about it.
No, but I think that's great though, Julie. And I think that's the thing. To go back to your question too, Jenny, I mean, from my perspective, I think the number is less important than what the calls are, right? Like if somebody's calling to pitch a job, they can make 200 calls to pitch a job to a stranger who they don't know. And I don't know how much they're going to improve, if I'm honest, because if you're pitching a job, it's just chance. It's a game of chance that the person is either interested or not. But you're not actually going there armed with a lot. You're going in being like, hey, stranger, you like this? Yes, no. Like it's so binary. It's not actually like a skillful exercise that improves your skill. But like, but like you said, Jenny, I mean, and you too, Julie, right? Not pitching a job on the call means you have to sort of anticipate what are the objections that this person will have, that they won't want to talk to me as a stranger. This is a bad time. I can't talk to you right now. I'm happy where I am. I don't want to move. Right. And then reasons to not want to move. You know, I love the people. I have money coming. Right. I'm a successful biller, so I've got billings coming in. But if you anticipate those and you know you're calling with value, then it changes the game, right? Like you said, Jenny, they're not really objections. They're just curiosities. Oh yeah, your commission's great. How does your commission work after all? Like what's amazing? You know, should we be talking to, should we be hiring for you guys? You guys sound amazing. What's going on over there? But it changes the game. And like those 5 of those calls will probably do more to help somebody than 200 calls of calling a total stranger based on their LinkedIn and pitching them a job, hoping that they're ready for it. Because I don't feel it's much.
I also think it's okay to be happy in your job.
Yep,
you know,
absolutely.
It's okay that actually, do you know what? I am happy because that's giving you market intelligence. Why are you happy? What do you get there? You know, what is this, etc. And it's helping you as a recruiter to understand that maybe the places that you're headhunting from or you're approaching, actually, you know, should they be clients? Should they be? Should we turn it over? Or so yeah, it's absolutely fine. And I don't mind when I speak to somebody that's happy because.
You know, that's great.
Things change.
That's fantastic that they're happy. So our job is not to disrupt someone's life to make it worse.
No.
Our job is to try and improve their life by a new position better for whatever reason. So if they're happy, great, good for you. Fantastic.
I had a situation a couple of months ago where I did do it through outreach on LinkedIn, and the particular person came back and said, look, I am really happy at the moment, but equally I'm happy to have a conversation, but it's not the right time for me to move. So I was like, yeah, that's brilliant. Let's, I want to get to know you, etc. Build a relationship so that when I do want to move, I understand who I'm speaking to and it's not just a reaction. And when I was talking to this person, and we spoke probably for about 45 minutes, in fact, and right at the end, they actually shared with me that they get headhunted quite a lot. They're an established recruiter, and they give the same response, like, I'm happy, but happy to have a conversation, for the future. And if other people turn around and say, well, actually, no, do you know what? We'll talk when you're ready to move. And it's like, no, talk to me now, because this is how we build a relationship. And there's no sort of other intention apart from, I want to get to know you. I want to get to know who you are, what you do, what you like, what would it be in the future, but it's not about now, and it's like, great, happy days that other people are not prepared to talk to them.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. I mean, sorry, Rick, what a fabulous opportunity. And funnily enough, I've had, but it's also, it's the expectation of the other person on the other side, right? Because so I literally have got messages coming in as we speak from somebody that I was trying to talk to this morning. So this is a live example, and he's like, no, I'm perfectly fine. I'm not looking. And I'm like, but that's okay. That's okay. And I mean this from my heart, William, when you know, if you happen to be talking about it or watching this now, like, I just want to talk to you, because at some point, you're not going to stay there for the next 50 years. At some point, you will want to move. So what better than having someone in your back pocket that has an idea of what you might want at some point that might think of you, right? How much, isn't that a good thing? Like, it's not going to cost.
And it's market intelligence as well, isn't it? It's almost like benchmarking and just sharing information, because if you're an expert in the field that you work in, then that information actually is invaluable.
It is.
Yeah.
I think that people like, it's the whole idea is, oh, I don't want to move right now. And it's just kind of like, yet. But, having a conversation with someone and exploring, just learning what else is out there, like something that we've been sort of toying with and talking about, is to just frame these calls a little bit more as a get to know you and get to know the market call, more than, because people are so programmed, and we're calling recruiters in our business, so it's even worse. Of course, we're all programmed for this, to assume that someone has a job for you in mind, that they're going to try and push you to go do something you don't want to do. But even just reframing the call as, instead of just a pure discovery call, which I think people think they can see through and assume we're going to push them into something, it's just kind of like, do you want to just see how what you have stacks up against what's out there? Book a call with us and let's discuss that, and we can explore together, what are the pros and cons of what you have versus what else is out there, which is, I think, what we always did anyway. But at least if we're just very upfront about it, like in big lights, like, this is not to try to push you to do something you don't want to do, but you can actually use this as an opportunity to explore what options exist and check to see what the pros and cons are of what you have, because nothing's perfect, right? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the same goes for clients, actually, too. So going back to what we said earlier around, if you're ad chasing, let's just say as an example, I honestly wouldn't. I think probably, it depends on the situation, but I probably wouldn't try and pick up any job if it's been advertised. In my experience, the goal of my call would mostly be to try and develop a client relationship. So as soon as you can sort of push the job to the side, because that's what they expect you to want to talk about, because that's what everyone else talks about, it's like, oh, someone wants, and I would actually say that, my goal here is to develop a relationship with you, so that next time, here's the word trap coming up, next time when you actually are ready to hire somebody, you think of me because I had a meaningful conversation with you, rather than advertise, because what a waste of time. So, send me down this rabbit hole with 10 other recruiters of like, oh, I'm looking for this perfect candidate. To your point, the person, the perfect candidates don't exist. What you want to do is engage with somebody who can get to the root of your business problem and can actually support you and help you and guide you to the right person, whoever that may be. So having that type of conversation and leaving that potential fee, which wasn't really there anyway, but was dangled as a bit of a carrot, on the table for someone else if they want to, take that. I think that's partly around confidence. There's confidence around that's okay to do, that's totally okay to do, and actually will get you further forward and develop a better, meaningful relationship with a client that I think will end up respecting you more.
100%.
Yeah.
Just to address we have a very avid commenter today, which is awesome.
We do. This is
invited to the panel next time or whatever. But so just to call out some of those, we had a spot on Jenny coming in from what you were saying, Jenny, which is great, and loving your approach, which is awesome. And then much easier via phone than email. Someone who is agreeing with us that doing the cold calling approach is easier to do cold via phone. Being a human being important. LOL. That's true. It is important. I think I hung on that one for a little bit. And then like winging it can work. Prefer the balance of some research, not too much. Like fear will stop you from making the first call under the guise you need to do more research. I think that's an interesting point, is like, you don't want to get stuck in the researching forever and then avoiding picking up the phone. So I thought that was a good point to bring up too, right? Like,
I'm sure there's probably 100 reasons not to pick up the phone, isn't there?
Right? More than that. More, absolutely.
All reasons, but none of them are good. You should pick up.
But I think just going back to that though, because when I think about doing this or having to do this, or wanting to do this and making calls, I think that the way to set yourself up for a positive experience is partly around the prep, yes, and if you're a winger, maybe a bit of winging and prep. But it's also if you put yourself a block, like a call blocking time, so that if it isn't your most favourite thing to do, that at the end of the call block, you're done. Right, so you've achieved your goal. So during my 1 hour call block or something like that, I'm going to make 50 calls. I'm going to get through to 3 people, or maybe the goal is I'm going to actually get through to 5 people. And once I've got through to 5 people, I'm going to stop for a bit. So if you actually have a time frame or a goal associated, so that you haven't got to do this all day, as an example, if that's not what you're supposed to be doing all day, then I think it just can sort of relieve the tension around putting stuff off, to be honest, and coming up with all of those different reasons. You're going to have to do it at some point. So if you either block it, and now I would turn off all distractions, because that's the other excuse. It's like beautiful to be able, I've got emails coming in, lovely. I'll respond to my emails, perfect. If you turn off your email, you turn off your distractions, you turn off your phone, then there's nothing else for you to do other than, and I think actually you are able to focus.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just conscious of the time, and I know that we are going to be losing our access to Jenny Finch shortly. Although, Julie, you and I can perhaps stay on if you wanted to tackle some more of the sales objections potentially. But Jenny, I was wondering if there's just on this specific front, do you have any good word tracks you yourself like to use? Like if you call a candidate, like we're saying, if you're winging it or whatever, you're calling a candidate, like what does one say? You know what I mean? If you're not pitching a job and someone says, "Oh, I'm happy where I'm at right now." Do you launch right now? How do you handle that kind of thing?
I think for me, I don't actually have a standard word track that I would use, because I think that one of the reasons that I don't is everybody's different. So the background of the person is different, where they are, which firm they're at, how long they've been doing it, and I think that are you connected? Do you have connections in common? Have you got, sometimes you might have 100 connections in common, so it's almost like rude not to have a conversation. I might go down that route. And so it really does depend. And I think that I try and disarm as much as anything, almost like, I'm not expecting you to be saying, "Oh, yes, I'm ready to move" in this conversation. That's not the intention. A little bit like the client side as well. The intention is to get to know you a little bit more, in terms of, if I had a role that I'm not putting out into the marketplace, and it was a confidential role, or it was a role that was a growth role, if I can see where they're up to, what would you like me to ring you about? What would you like to hear about? But it's, do I have a set word track, Mr. Jones? No, I don't. Because, yeah, but I think you can insert, there's a structure, but I think with candidates in particular, there isn't that structure, because, when I used to get headhunt calls, the approach has to be to me. I'd expect somebody, when they haven't looked at my profile, when somebody doesn't know where I'm working, they don't understand the business that I'm in, then, the credibility is lost quite early on. So I think that you need to ensure that you're clear that you have looked at that person's profile, you have done a little bit of research, you understand where they're working, you understand what their role is in that organization, if you know your marketplace as well, rather than just, they're an accountancy and finance recruiter. It's a bit deeper than that. So I think once you can demonstrate that quite early on, then again, and also demonstrate that it's a confidential conversation, that this is something that won't go anywhere else, and it is in complete confidence, because I think people are nervous as well. Like,
That's true,
who are you going to speak to? Who do you know? Who are we going to share that with? And it's like nobody. Absolutely categorically nobody at all, and I've never broken that ever. So, one of the other things that I will always do when I'm starting to speak to somebody is make it very clear up front as well that I will not be sending them to any company or speaking to any company without their direct permission, unless they want to be, that's different. But genuinely speaking, I get their permission before I do that. And then, hopefully that gives credibility that you know, that they are giving me my permission, and if we do secure an interview, that they're happy to go as well.
You know, I think so. I say that, and I mean that but because I feel that I need to, meaning that your resume will not go anywhere without your permission, and I absolutely mean that. But it's still surprising to me that people are worried about that, because it's obviously not common practice for that to happen, which makes me think, is it common practice for them to do that in their business? It's, and it feels like, honestly, it is that just resumes are just, you know, which, you know, is a short.
Well, I spoke to a candidate yesterday who we had a great conversation, long conversation, you know, understanding what this person wanted, talked to them about this opportunity, and I explained that I was going to get their permission. They needed to get their CV to me, which they were going to do. They sent the CV, and then I think that they panicked a little bit, because all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, you know, there's connections in common, you know, you're not going to speak to somebody, you're not going to reference me. It's like, no, I'm just not going to do it. So I think sometimes we underestimate, and I understand that when I was, you know, in different roles, I was fearful of, you know, loose lips and everything, you know, in terms of, you know, are you going to share that I've had a conversation? And actually I want to protect myself. I want to protect where I've been there for a long time, you know. So I get it. I do. And I take it really, well, we all do. We take it really seriously that someone's career is important, and you want to allow someone to remain to have the choice of looking versus being pulled into a room saying, you know, I've got your CV from somewhere, I hear that you're on the market. That's a very difficult conversation. So yeah.
It's true. And it is a small world sometimes too, right? Like, I mean, staffing people do know other staffing people. So I totally understand the desire to make sure that it's discussed and it's top of mind. Like, hey, please don't talk about this with other people, because maybe they, you know, it's happened a couple times in my career that I just didn't know until I knew that there have been these like husband and wife hiring manager pairs who are both hiring managers of different companies who are potential clients of mine. And so sometimes you can't help it. You'll submit a candidate to someone not knowing their spouse is a hiring manager of the company of the candidate you submitted. And now suddenly the hiring manager knows that they're looking, and it's come up to me. And again, like, of course, we don't fault them for it because no one's done anything wrong. But my point is, it can be a small world, right? So I understand the fear, because that's all it takes, right? And so, yeah, it makes sense. And it is important, agreed, like to be confidential. As the kids say.
Well, I'm gonna thank everybody so much, but I do need to scoot. But
thanks, Jenny.
Yeah, it's I've really enjoyed this, and thank you for everyone's participation as well online. So everyone have a great evening.
Thanks, Jenny. You too, and see you next week. Julie, and what the heck? And
yes,
yeah, exactly. Then number 2. Yeah, how about on your end, Julie? I mean, I know we won't keep this rolling all day, but I thought it'd be good to get your take as well in terms of specific, you know, objections, which we covered the main ones, really, right? Like, I don't have time to talk right now. If it's a cold call to a candidate or a client for that matter, don't have time to talk. If it's a candidate, happy where I am, there's money on the table I don't want to walk away from, or a promotion or what have you. Or on the client, if you want to go that route, right? Like, we have vendors, we're good, we're not really hiring.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I don't have a particular script either. So all of the scripting stuff that I talked about was from very early on in my career, which is absolutely fine, and that doesn't matter. And people, if you need a script, you need a script, and that's absolutely fine. But I think it's, I don't feel the need for a script. I do. I think Jenny said a very poignant word, actually. I try my best to disarm.
Yeah, that's great.
So I think that actually is the nugget from this whole thing, is disarming whoever it is, and however you do that, whether it's from humor or, you know, just blatantly just saying like, this is a cold call. You know, it's like, so I don't think people are expecting those types of things. And I think it's disarm as much as you can first, and then listen. like listen and really listen, and you can hear it. And I think that's all around the context of these conversations, is your emotional intelligence around what someone's actually saying without them having to say it. Is okay, if someone is about to go into a meeting, this isn't just an excuse. You can, I think, generally hear that. You might push it for a couple more seconds and then back off, dependent on how they respond again. But it's very important to respect what someone says, because I think that will get you to the next point more likely.
Agreed. And that comes down to, again, like I really feel strongly about the being able to make it a real conversation and being a human being, even when it's a total stranger, versus like the word tracks are fine, but they're also very obvious most of the time. And it makes the call feel less interesting immediately for the receiver of the call, you know what I mean, in a big way. So like you're not gonna book a second call, even if you have a meeting with somebody who feels like they're reading off a script. Like, no offense to anybody, it's just rare, right? I mean, it's just not interesting.
I think it's dependent on how they and what they say, because if we all have to do that, or we might do that in our beginning of our career. I mean, funny enough, I did speak to someone a few months ago that we didn't end up placing, but we were talking about the sales calls and what would you say? And I even said to him, like, you can even call someone who is clearly more senior than you in this journey and say, like, you're my first call. Like, I'm looking for some help. Like, I'm looking to build my career, and maybe stroke their ego a little bit in terms of like, how do you think I'm doing, and what do you think I should say? Because I think most people want to help, and most people aren't ogres. And here's my script. What do you think of it? So you could add some humor into it and sort of see what happens, or at the end of it and say, like, what did you think? That's the first time I've done that. However, but I just don't think that you need to be like a robot scripter.
100%. It's that radical genuineness, right? Where you can sort of step outside of yourself for a second and be like, hey, we're both doing this, man. Like you're on the receiving end and I'm on the calling end. I do like the idea of having a couple of things in mind of where the conversation could go in case the person is receptive and they're like, well, what did you want to ask me? Like, what did you know what I mean? Like, so having loose things to be like, well, I want to ask you, did according to your LinkedIn, like, you got promoted in 2024. Everybody else was getting let go in 2024. Everybody else's billings went down. What's the secret to your success? Like, I look at profiles all day. That looks great. How did you do this? So just having little nuggets that you can genuinely bring in that are specific things that aren't just like transparent things of, I'm trying to keep you on the phone to build a relationship, Mr. or Mrs. Candidate, but just real questions. Or like, you left this company. I heard this happened at that company. What was that like? You know what I mean? Just little things real things. To be curious, just curiosity about what it is that they do, I think goes a long, long way. Even with a stranger, like very early in the relationship, a little bit of genuine curiosity about them, I feel like gets people to engage.
Yeah. I mean, I just going back to this William folk, I don't know whether he's still messaging me, but he was messaging me a little bit ago, but maybe he's still online. Maybe he's jumped on here, but he happens to work in a particular sector that I'm interested in. And I've turned the conversation or my messaging back to him, and this wasn't a call, this was actually a messaging on LinkedIn, just saying, I'm interested in this sector. I need to learn about it, and I want to learn. I'd love to know from you. I'd like to pick your brains. Like, who do you think has got a very good reputation in this particular sector? And that's where I should be hunting. So I'm after some help here. So whatever it is that just gets the conversation going, but is then valuable, right? Because we're not just sitting there talking to people all day for no benefit, right? So it's like, how can this benefit maybe both of us to at least give me some time?
Yep, for sure. I would be remiss not to bring up a couple of things from my own early sales training. Like, you had Mr. Jones. And I had one sales trainer way back years and years ago who broke it down to, he's like, all objections are really two types, and it's the same answer to both. It's either a problem, like you either need to identify a problem in the cold call, or a value that you're bringing, right? It's one of the two. There's two approaches, and he's like, basically they all stem from that. I don't know how true that is really, if I agree, but that's what his training was. And it's like, if both of them, the answer is perfect, that's the reason I'm calling you today. So That's always the mentality. So that's because if there's any kind of problem that you identify, it's like, that's why I'm calling. This is what I do. The value is me. I will fix this problem for you. You don't have
Yeah.
headcount issues. Let's talk about that. Like, or you don't have headcount space. Let's talk about that. I can help you strategize and tell you what other companies are doing. Blah blah blah. I can give you benchmarking information to figure out how you can achieve your goal without having to add headcount, or why do you have this problem, right? Let's think it through together. And the other one was value, which again is you're the value. So whatever it is, it's like, we have another vendor. It's like, oh yes, but you do not have me. So let's talk about, you know what I mean, what else we're doing, right? So it's always a value or problem approach, and the answer is always, that's why I called you, by the way.
Yes, yes. Well, it'd be interesting to see what your word tracks. I don't know what your word tracks were, or whether you were even given word tracks, or it's like I'd love to see those actually. Maybe we should put some sort of checklist or quick pick list together around here are the objections and here are some of the word tracks that we've used over the years, which might help people. But
absolutely,
for a more junior or entry level person, that might be a sort of starting point.
Yeah, bonus content. We'll work on some bonus content of like a little objection handling, our favorites anyway. I mean, there's so many you could look up online, some of which I vehemently disagree with. So I would not advise people to just go online and start saying those necessarily, because some of them are bad out there. But yeah, maybe we could do our top. Each member of Raven George does their top 5 favorites. Yeah.
Or top crazy. Top 5 crazies.
Yeah. For real.
Brilliant.
Well, thank you very much, Julie, and everybody who participated. I saw a question about my audio interface. I will DM you about audio interface stuff and not make it the content of this this podcast. But yeah, thanks all, and hope to see you next week.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rick.